Brightburn begins with a husband and wife, Kyle and Tori Breyer, who are yearning to have children. One night, the couple was forcefully shocked, and the power went out. Tori noticed a red light appear not far from their home. Tori might be seen seeking for her son, Brandon, 12 years later. Tori was concerned about Brandon's absence from his room that morning. She immediately looked for her son in the barn, startling Brandon, who was hiding there. Tori and Kyle have been overjoyed since Brandon arrived in their home, knowing that their family is finally complete. Furthermore, Brandon is a bright student in school. Although this does not protect him from bullying by his classmates, Brandon receives encouragement from his classmate, Caitlin, who believes he is a genius student and that geniuses will dominate the world. Brandon felt more secure after hearing Caitlin's words and attempted to ignore the bullying from the other students. That night, as Brandon slept in his room, he heard a weird sound and saw a red light appear from inside the barn. A few times later, he received a violent jolt, forcing him to sleep in the barn. Tori, who was drawing, became humiliated and left the house. When she noticed something moving quickly, she felt suspicious and hurried to the barn. She discovered Brandon attempting to access the vault, which flashed a red light. Tori instantly prevented the youngster from opening it and sent him home. The following day, while Kyle and Brandon were conducting carpenter work, it was discovered that Brandon was the Breyers' adopted child. Kyle and Tori, on the other hand, adore Brandon and consider him to be their biological child. Kyle then instructed Brandon to cut the lawn while he went into town to purchase seeds. When Brandon couldn't start the lawnmower, he accidentally flung it far enough. Brandon, who had felt odd about it for a long time, stuck his hand inside the still-running lawnmower and was unhurt. Kyle and Tori went Brandon to a local restaurant to celebrate his birthday with her younger sister Meryl and her husband, Noel. Noel then gave Brandon a hunting firearm as a birthday present. However, Kyle believed Brandon was too young to use the rifle and promptly snatched the gift from his kid. Brandon had an unexpected reaction, becoming so upset at his father that Kyle and Tori decided to take him home. Tori tried to calm her husband down by explaining that Brandon's actions was reasonable. The two then decided to take Brandon camping. Kyle noticed Brandon acting strangely, chewing a fork until he bent down while getting ready to go camping. Tori, who was cleaning Brandon's clothes in the room, came upon a brochure about gorgeous women and the anatomy of the female body. Tori presented it to Kyle, and the two agreed to give Brandon some advice. Kyle and Brandon discussed intimate interactions between men and women while looking. Brandon appeared to pay close attention to what his father was saying. That night, Tori awoke to find Brandon in the tent. Meanwhile, Brandon entered Caitlin's room and covertly watched her via the window. But when Caitlin discovered Brandon was present, she shouted for her mother because she was afraid. Erica, Caitlin's mother, went to her daughter's room but couldn't find Brandon anywhere. Brandon falls for Caitlin while participating in a school activity with his peers. She lets him fall to the floor and accuses him of being a pervert, citing previous encounters in her room at night. Caitlin is obliged to assist Brandon, but Brandon, enraged by her accusations, crushes her hand. Erica requests that Brandon's parents be held accountable for this occurrence and that Sheriff Deaver arrest him. However, because Brandon is still a minor, the sheriff has limited options, and Brandon is just suspended from school. Tori and Kyle argue about Brandon after they get home after Tori explains that Brandon fell asleep on the hike and she saw him trying to access the cellar in the cabin. Kyle became increasingly persuaded that Brandon was unlike other children because he had never been sick or wounded. While Tori looks for an extraterrestrial object that crashed near her house 12 years ago, Brandon sleepwalks back to the farm. Brandon approaches the warehouse where Tori and Kyle concealed an extraterrestrial thing. Tori, who knew this, immediately followed Brandon and witnessed him fly while saying, "Take the world." Tori attempted to reach out to Brandon, but something happened that caused Brandon to be injured for the first time. Tori then tightly hugged the youngster, who appeared horrified at what had just happened. Tori later confessed to Brandon that she and Kyle discovered a baby boy in a spaceship 12 years ago. They subsequently decided to adopt the infant and name him Brandon. Brandon went on a destructive frenzy after hearing his mother's confession. He immediately went to meet Caitlin and apologized for bruising her hand. However, Caitlin appeared to be terrified of Brandon's presence because her mother forbade her from contacting him again. Brandon finally departed. Erica, who was working alone in the restaurant at the time, was taken aback when she noticed the double B symbol painted on the restaurant window. Soon later, the restaurant's lighting failed, and as Erica looked at the lamp, it exploded, sending particles into her eyes. Brandon is pictured wearing a costume to conceal his identity. Erica then grabbed a baseball bat and hid in the closet. However, Brandon was able to get access to the closet by melting down the metal door. The following day, Sheriff Deaver came at the area and discovered Erica's body nowhere. The sheriff discovered the double B symbol painted on every window of the restaurant. Marilee, a supervisory teacher at Brandon's school, is in a counseling session with Brandon about the accident that wounded Caitlin's hand. Marilee asks Brandon whether he feels bad about hurting Caitlin, but Brandon showed no remorse. Marilee then stated that she needed to inform the school, parents, and Sheriff Deaver about the outcome of their therapy session. She asked Brandon to think about the repercussions of his actions. At night, Brandon went to Marilee's residence and requested her not to inform the sheriff or his parents. Marilee, however, was determined to speak the truth and told Brandon to return home. Brandon sneaked into Marilee's room right as she was ready to fall asleep. At the same moment, Noah, who had just gotten home, saw Brandon hiding in his closet. Noah then summoned Brandon and planned to take him home. Instead, Brandon attacked and killed the man. He also created a symbol of his name as he killed Erica. Kyle and Tori looked concerned since Brandon hadn't arrived home yet. Soon later, Brandon arrived home shirtless. The child said he had just returned from playing football, and his clothes were filthy. Kyle and Tori quickly realized Brandon was lying since the youngster refused to let Tori take his soiled clothes. Kyle and Tori got into another altercation over Brandon, leading Kyle to have nightmares. Marilee called Tori in the middle of the night to inform her that Noah had perished in an accident. Kyle and Tori immediately went to the hospital. Marilee informed Tori and her husband that authorities suspect Noah's death was caused by drunk driving. She then told Marilee about Brandon coming to her house the night Noah died. The next day, Tori and Kyle informed Brandon of Noah's death, but Brandon showed little emotion or sorrow, which enraged them. Kyle quickly accused Brandon of murdering Noah and arrested him, but Brandon replied by forcibly pushing him away. Kyle then sneaked into Brandon's room and discovered his clothes stained with blood. Kyle revealed it to Tori, but she refused to believe her son was the murderer. Later that night, Kyle apologized to Tori and proposed fishing alone with Brandon to mend their relationship. Tori let her husband and son to go have fun together the next day. Kyle then took Brandon on a hunting excursion through the woods. Kyle's plan to kill Brandon with his gun failed when the bullet rebounded off the back of Brandon's head. Brandon recognized what Kyle was trying to accomplish, so he pursued him and murdered the man with focused eyesight. Meanwhile, while investigating Erica's missing case and Noah's accident, Sheriff Deaver discovered a clue. The same double B was at the site. Based on his analysis, Deaver found that Brandon Breyer's double B is short. Deaver hurried to Breyer's house to meet Brandon. But when Tori arrived, she informed the warden that Kyle and Brandon were not at home. Deaver then showed Tori the double B code discovered at the scene of Erica and Noah's deaths. Tori lied when Deaver inquired if she had ever seen the symbol. Tori raced to Brandon's room after Deaver departed, where she discovered Brandon's notepad, which contained a double B, a chronological snapshot of the boy's death, and his message to take the world. Tori finally comes to trust Kyle's claims about Brandon, who is most definitely a murderer. Tori tries to phone Kyle to inform him that Brandon murdered Erica and Noah. But Brandon answered the phone and intimated that he would be coming for Tori. Tori instantly called the police for assistance, knowing her safety was in jeopardy. At the same time, Brandon returns and starts trashing the house. The cops start coming to the Breyer home, but Brandon might easily kill them all. Tori mentions while concealing that Brandon could be hurt by the UFO. Tori dashed to the barn and discovered Erica's body burning. She rushed to get the spaceship component and then contacted Brandon. When Brandon approaches her, Tori attempts to express how much she loves him, no matter what he does. Tori then hugged Brandon and attempted to stab him with a piece of the spaceship. But Brandon was expecting it and quickly stopped her onslaught. In reaction, Brandon flies Tori miles above the clouds and pelts her to death just as the jet arrives. Brandon then drops the plane over Kyle and Tori's farmhouse to conceal his actions, which he also uses to destroy the spaceship, his only vulnerability. The next day, the police arrived, and the entire media crew reported that everyone involved in the accident had been certified dead, with Brandon being the lone survivor. Following that, Brandon launched his attacks around the world, which were broadcast by numerous television stations and became news headlines. Brandon was also known as Brightburn in the media. A conspiracy theorist known as Big T describes the Brightburn incident and the presence of additional superpowers. pleading for mankind to act before Brightburn and the other superpowers take over the globe.